All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to my live. Thank you to those of you who tune in religiously. If you are new, welcome. Shout out to those who are listening live on YouTube and Facebook, and welcome, my LinkedIn crew. All right. So, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Kathy Belletti. I'm the founder of Motivate with K.A.T, which is an admissions and leadership training company. I have been in higher education for about 17 plus years, serving in admissions. So I was an advisor, a director, a regional. So I totally get it. I understand how critical and challenging it is for your advisors to inspire just one student to take the next step in their career. But then, most importantly, the leaders, I know how stressful it could be to inspire the advisors who now have to inspire your students. Okay, so I create online training programs for your advisors and your leadership team, and it's a different perspective. Okay, it actually also aids in what your enrollment leaders are doing. I'm also the host of EdUp Career Schools, The Scoop. So that gives people like Jamie the opportunity to really express themselves and think and talk about, what's happening in higher education and how we can change it one day at a time. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner over here, Dr. Jamie. Introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thanks, Kathy. And thanks everyone that's listening right now. Happy to be here today, this morning, or whenever you're listening, whatever time zone you're in. We were just talking about getting the opportunity to work with folks across the world and making a difference in higher education. For me, in what I do at 3 Enrollment Marketing as the Vice President for 3E for Content Strategy, it really is about looking at marketing from a modern lens and how it applies to higher education and looking outside of higher ed, which I think is really important. I think for higher education, it is really difficult to look beyond the competitor next door or what somebody else is doing in higher ed. And I think the reality is we have to look at that our students are consumers. And we have to compete in that world. We have to compete in the world that Nike is competing for attention with these students in whatever TikTok. We have to compete for their attention there. So I really look at the content strategy and the best practices, not just in higher ed, but in retail and consumer trends. Looking at cognitive marketing, cognitive psychology, how that plays a role in what we do, and spent, like you said, 25 years in higher ed before joining 3E. And for me, that is obviously critical in what I do, but also being able to share with this group today my experience on both sides. And how that is so important and what we can bring to the table and remembering it's really about the student at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And that brings me to my point and why we chose this topic, because when it comes to advertising and marketing in higher education, it's very critical because sometimes you may have people saying, you know what, our student, they haven't changed. They've always been the same. It's just the way that you communicate with them. But then other people are like, no, our students have changed substantially. The bottom line is since COVID, our students are watching their coins very closely. People are paying attention to where they're investing their money. They're also paying attention to the courses that they are choosing. Because let's get real, a lot of times people spend thousands of dollars for an education and then they end up working in an industry that's nowhere near the money that they invested,
Absolutely.
right? But before they even get to your admissions teams, guess what they see first? They see your ads, they see your websites, and in a lot of cases, it may or may not resonate with them. And now you're getting angry because you're like, I'm throwing thousands of dollars at marketing and the math isn't mathing. Where are my leads? Why aren't my students converting? And so Jamie is actually going to walk us through some of the mishaps and mistakes that you guys may be making, some of the turnoffs when it comes to your students, but most importantly, how we can fix this so that you can move over, convert those leads, and get more students to the finish line. So first off, Jamie, I'm going to ask you, what do you enjoy so much about marketing in higher education? Because you could have chose any industry.
Right. I think not not untrue for most people that end up working in higher ed in some capacity. It becomes a true calling and a mission because you believe in the power of education and what it can do to change lives and communities. So there is that part of it that it truly is a big why for me, and where I believe that we can change the world for the better. A lot of it lies in higher ed and the ability to educate people, give people access to education. Um, I think also there for marketing, it's a real art and a science.
Mhm.
And I talk with people a lot about the fact that I think, marketing in higher ed is different. It is a different beast.
Mhm.
It takes a real understanding of psychology. It takes a real understanding of this evolving persona of students and what they need. It takes true empathy
Mhm.
for students and where they are. I, I think I think a lot of people think these are the fun jobs on campus. That admissions and marketing are you get to do the fun things,
Mhm.
and don't understand the real complexity behind what we do, and the strategy and the skill that it takes. And I
Mhm.
enjoy that. And I also enjoy staying up to date with everything, the evolution. You mentioned, do students change? It's the fact that our goals may not change. We are always trying to recruit more students. We always have to make that class, but the students' world changes rapidly. And you mentioned COVID. I know here at 3E, we even address that with a different persona
Mhm.
um, for students that have been impacted by COVID, and we call them disrupted consumers. And it's truly looking at them through the lens of a consumer who has now adapted and adopted. E-commerce is just commerce
Mhm.
because they learned that everything can happen
Exactly.
online. As you said, saving money, being affordable, what that actually means, understanding that this could happen again, what that might look like. Now, having gone through a really international um, catastrophe and
Mhm.
having that fear and understanding that. So I think for me, being able to understand the changes in technology, to understand the changes in platforms, and truly to understand the changes that people are going through, and to be able to keep up with all that is daunting but exciting.
Absolutely. And this is why it ties hand in hand with admissions. Because from the marketing side, the way that you're promoting these schools, you have to be able to speak to the student and who they are. But now, when you get to the admissions team, now they should be able to continue that narrative. It's not about, okay, the lead that came in on that form. It's about who you are, what you're doing right now, where you're trying to go. And we have to be able to have more effective conversations with students so that this program selection is not just something that they start and then a couple of weeks later they disappear.
100%.
It's just this whole cycle. So let's get into some of the major mistakes that we're seeing. And I'm going to talk from the outside perspective. Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to the expert. So, number one, I research a lot of different schools. I'm looking at a lot of different schools' websites. I see their ads, and a lot of times what I see are stock photos. So I'm looking at these stock photos and I'm like, okay. And then later on that night, I'm watching a show with my husband and a commercial comes on and I'm like, that photo looks interesting. I just saw that on 6 different websites earlier, right? So it's like, if I feel that way, how do we think our students feel? Because
100%.
believe it or not, some of these students may think that that's your student and they may be saying, oh, okay, so this is what the student body looks like. So imagine them watching TV and they're seeing the same photo, or they're on the train and they see an ad, they're walking down the street and they're like, wait a minute, I just saw these same people on 6 different school websites. So that's not who our student body looks like.
Right,
It's a
right.
turn off. And sometimes it could just dig at them because they were excited and now they're like, is this false advertising?
It feels icky. I think, and icky is not a technical term. But I think the thing with stock photos, I strongly recommend you don't use stock photos. And that's, the primary reason is that it doesn't say anything about your institution at all. It doesn't identify something that is unique about you clearly because it is a stock photo. Other schools are using them. Other places can use them. These pop up. What you also have to think about is they may be used in places that you don't want to be associated with.
Mm-hmm.
It is one thing for it to be used by another institution. I mean, you don't necessarily want that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not like it's being used by a group that you truly want to, disassociate from.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they have this mental recall and they're like this cognitive dissonance between was that XYZ university or was that this really horrible organization that's putting out really awful information? And they can't make that, they're making this connection, which because the visual is the same. You run that risk when you start using stock photos. And I think we've kind of joked about this. It's the phrase "three in a tree." It's not a stock photo, but it might as well be
Uh-huh.
because every campus has one. And I'm not the first to use the phrase. I think it was 160/90 agency that came up with literally wrote the book on it.
Mm-hmm.
Take 3 students, put them in front of any tree on campus, take a
Mm-hmm.
picture, make sure they're all laughing, looking at one another, having a conversation. Two guys and a girl or 2 girls and a guy. You certainly don't want 2 guys and a girl because that will look strange.
Uh-huh.
Possibly two Caucasian or white students and at least 1 student of color to represent diversity.
Mm-hmm.
It's so so overdone and so fake that it might as well be a stock photo.
Mm-hmm.
Every campus has them. All you have to do is switch out the sweatshirt or the t-shirt. Again, it says nothing about your particular institution, and just as easily is confusing to students when they see these repeated across websites or publications. Okay, so you all have 3 smiling students that look at books. Who cares? What does that mean? I think you and I mentioned I never had that experience as a college student. I never sat down with 2 other students and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have my college sweatshirt on, so you can't sit here. I'm going to need somebody else to come over." Just isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a big part of being authentic in some of that. That schools really need to look at. Looking at where students are taking photos of themselves and with other students, that should give you some insight into what other students want to see. Things that are real, things that are really happening on your campus that highlight that student experience. I think too on websites, kind of what's happening, what's going wrong. So many words.
Oh,
Just paragraphs and paragraphs. Think about making it really easy to digest, easy to consume. You're talking about people that scroll through up to 300 feet of content a day.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about your paragraphs. They want to know what they want to know. They want to know it as quickly as possible. And if they can't find it, they're moving on. So make sure you get that out there as quickly and what I call snackable content possible. That to me is also another huge problem. I like to call it vomitous. In higher ed, we like to say everything that's great about our institution, and that's awesome when you tell that story, but you don't need to do it all on one page.
No, not at all. But then also sometimes your students really could care less about all the amazing things that's going on at your campus if they don't see what's in it for them.
100%.
So it's like, okay, congratulations, but I don't see anything on this website that resonates with me. I don't see anyone on this website that looks like me. Going back to the 3 in a tree, sometimes it could be a turnoff because your students may be saying, well, that's not who I am.
Yep.
I don't resonate with those people that are in the photos, even if you have the African American who you can see half of their face peeping in the corner because they have to be there. You know, some students may say, this is not the type of campus life that I actually envision. The copy, I've seen websites that's paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Our students, they don't read that.
No.
You know, even as adults, when we go to certain websites, unless we're looking for, research on different topics, when we see all that copy, we abandon site too, because it's like, I don't have time for this. I'll revisit this later. And then we never do.
Well, I think, you told me to be real on here. And this is, for me, what's real.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to, and when I use we, I mean everybody in higher ed or adjacent to higher ed, create and review content on the desktop.
That is true.
90% of your students and your prospective students are obtaining that content on a mobile device.
There you go.
So what we see and what our experience is, we're accustomed to showing our administrators the prettiest version of a website on a desktop, because that is how they experience the world. That is not how students experience the world. And so I think, that's a shift for a lot of people in higher ed to think about, how you're presenting information, the way that we experience things and the way that we design or present information and what we experience. Like right now, I'm on a desktop recording this with you. What's the mobile experience for a student?
Exactly.
What's that like? I think that's top of mind. That really has to be top of mind. And when you think about content, multiple paragraphs, even sentences are too much.
Bullet points, videos, photos. Matt Haynes, he said, all marketing is stage authenticity. The 3 tree is just bad staging. Jamie knows how authenticity works and matters. It's so true, and it's a turnoff. What do you think are some suggestions that we can actually make for schools really trying to, nip this in the bud?
Yeah. So, I think that content is huge. Really starting to think about things in terms of what's the most critical information that I need to deliver, and making sure that's first and foremost, and in really nuggets, just bullets, short, sweet. Thinking about the mobile experience, and really thinking about the student experience as a consumer experience, and not as we're going to give you all the information, we put it on the web, now you find it. That is not how we experience the world when we're making a decision about what to buy. And this is an investment for a student, just like you mentioned earlier. What are they going to put into their education? What's the return on investment for them? Think about it in terms of that consumer journey, making sure that their questions are being answered in the right stages. And marketing admissions, when that doesn't work together, I've seen the meme and I've shared it online on LinkedIn. I think from it's like it has to be almost inseparable. Because you start telling different narratives, and then you don't, the student sniffs that out very quickly, right? Marketing can put the greatest story out there with beautiful pictures and beautiful headlines and a great CTA. But if that doesn't gel with the student experience, or if that doesn't gel with what the advisors need to get from the students, or how the advisors are asking the questions, then it automatically starts to break down. So admissions and marketing have to be definitely on the same page.
Definitely in sync. And Pedro Santana, he said, suggestions, keep it real. And if real doesn't look good, fix it.
Well, that's, we're keeping it real. And I think that fixing it is I think for Pedro, and I totally agree with him here. Used to hear people talk about the money walk on campus. And I think one of the things about many folks feel like, hey, that's not in my job. So it's not from, and I believed very, very strongly that everything is marketing. Marketing is everything when it comes to the campus experience and being able to provide what students need. If something didn't look good, if there were dead flowers, I'm not going to blame facilities.
There you go.
I have two hands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fully capable. I go pull that out. Or I start, I do whatever. Admissions and marketing folks need to think that way. That's part of the sell. And I think, if real doesn't look good, fix it. If this wall looks horrible, you figure out something. You get somebody to paint a mural on it. You fix those things. And being real and being authentic often doesn't mean that everybody doesn't look like a Cosmo model in your photos. It's important that students see themselves. And I think that is sometimes hard for
Mm-hmm.
for leaders on campus, because we want to present the
Like,
brand in a certain way. But I guarantee you, not everybody walking around your campus looks like a Vogue or GQ model. So make sure you're representing your student body.
exactly. Let's get real. Your students are wearing crop tops and bubble coats. They're wearing Crocs with socks. Okay. So when you look at some websites and you see the button down and the khakis, who looks like that? Sometimes you have to be able to just take a walk around your school and say, what does our student body look like? Yes, you're not going to put a crop top and a bubble coat on your website, but there is some median there where you can say, all right, we can take pictures of students that look like this. I love to see selfies
100%.
on the website, because number one, for this generation especially, to put a selfie on their social media, and they know who's going to be looking at it, and they're not going to put something on their personal social media where their friends are going to go, oh, what are you doing? So I love when I see two students get together and they're taking a picture together, they're smiling, they're laughing, because it says that they're enjoying their experience. It's about the student experience. So we have to showcase that on our website. How about lunchrooms? Let's get real. Our students love to eat.
Well, sure, they love to eat, and that's. I mean, think about. I mean, I know, but after I finish breakfast, I'm thinking about what I'm having for lunch. Right? I mean, that's part of the human experience, and students don't stop being human when they go to college. They want to see what their life will be like, and that includes eating, that includes dining, that includes all kinds of things that we don't necessarily think of as the student experience. You definitely want to highlight academics. You definitely want to highlight the health and wellness benefits. Definitely, and even health and wellness. I think we're not doing a great enough job in expanding on what that means.
Yeah.
We show off a rec center. What are we doing to showcase mental health resources? I think really digging into what it is that they need. And what life looks like for them, all going back again to that authenticity, understanding who they are, what it is they need or want, and being able to support what it means to be successful to them, and what a successful and good life looks like. I think we talked a little bit about representation in different ways. I think too, higher ed has a problem with thinking. I'm going to use vomitous again. If we put it all out there, that it should appeal to everybody. I think that's a problem, because I guarantee everybody that is listening right now, and I've mentioned Pedro and Matt, we have a lot in common. However, we also have different opinions about different things. We also have different interests, and I suspect there would be things that would appeal to Matt that would not be appealing to me. There would be things that would be appealing to Pedro that may not be appealing to you if you saw it on a website. So we need to think about, only you only need to focus in on maybe 10% of that population at a time. Make sure that it's personal. Make sure there's something there to truly engage and to truly interest students. If you're appealing to everybody, you're not saying much at all.
Yeah. And tying into that, there are so many campuses that have multiple locations. And sometimes when I look on the website, if you click on 5 different locations, it's the same type of copy and the same type of photos. I was a regional where I traveled to multiple campuses every single week. And some of these areas were night and day.
Sure.
So if you have a campus that's in the city, but then you have another campus that's like in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, that's not the same thing. Those are two totally different worlds altogether. So if you're marketing for Pittsfield, you need to be able to resonate to those people who are in that area. Those are not city people at
Right.
all. And I
Right.
think that's where we make the mistake. When I was talking about the lunchroom, a lot of times when I used to give tours to students, a lot of them used to say, where's your break room? Because let's get real, students are not excited about school.
Yeah.
They're excited about the end result. But students want to know during my breaks, where can I go? How about taking pictures of the neighborhood or some of the eateries, that's surrounding the school? Because
100%.
even though they're there for a purpose to learn, right? All students are looking forward to that break time. So they're like, okay, during my break, I can actually go over here and sit down and have my lunch by myself. They may not want to be on the school premises. So being able to tell the students, okay, this is what surrounds the school, this is what the experience, because in and out, it's still a student experience.
100%. 100%. And that, that reminds me of, I remember getting a book in the campus mail from a dear friend of mine, who at the time I think was a college dean, Clorinda Phillips, who's now at Texas A&M. One of the schools is not coming to me right now. Irrelevant. And I was having an argument with other people on campus about campus photos, going back to dining. And I had used a photo of all African American students in the dining hall, seated at one table. And I was getting pushback because, again, going back to the 3 in the tree, we needed representation. Can we not have a table that has, hands across the globe, right? And she sent a book of, why are all the Black kids eating together? And I'm gonna. This doesn't sound like it's tied together, but it does. In that we are representing a campus culture, and the support. There's so much more than just that photo. When you represent it, that there is a culture there that supports students, that there is a community for students, and I'm calling out students of color here, but it's about any group of students. And so that, I think that book in particular stands out for me in this kind of conversation. When we talk about that a photo isn't just a photo, it tells a deeper narrative about the community and culture of a campus in all the different supports that may or may not be there, which I think, Pedro was talking about. If it's not real, then fix it. Sometimes those fix-its are way deeper than painting a wall.
Yeah, that's so true. And how do you feel about copy? Like a lot of times I see ready to get started. I mean, the bottom line is most of your students are like, no, I'm not ready. I'm just at the beginning of my search. And really and truly, I may not be ready for the next couple of years. What about copy that may say, what would your kids think? Or what would your family say? Or how do you feel about the possibility of this career path? I think some of that type of soft language would actually bring that wall down so that when they get to admissions, they're not automatically like, wait a minute, before we get started, I am not enrolling today. You know how many times we hear that?
Right. And, I think that thinking through, again, the personas about, we do a disservice to students in thinking through things as, well, they are a sophomore, they need to be doing this. They are a 19-year-old, so they should be doing this, or they need to be thinking about this, or they need to be at this part of their life. Everybody has their own journey. So really, when we think about personas, and what I'm getting to with the language part is, how does that question or that call to action call to a particular persona. So if
Mhm.
I'm a scared student, if I am not ready, thinking about that as a persona of students, not a 19-year-old,
Mhm. Yeah.
because that really is irrelevant.
Yep.
It's where are you in your journey? Do you know what you want to do? What does tomorrow look like? What does the next 20 years look like for you?
Mhm.
Um, what does the future hold? Um, which of these emojis most excites you?
Mhm.
Putting different kinds of academic disciplines. It doesn't even have to be something about starting or enrolling,
Mhm.
just getting them involved in a conversation. And I think that is the part that's hard because we are so driven on numbers. It's get the RFI, get the enroll, get them to matriculate. Um, but none of that happens without a conversation.
Absolutely. And Jamie, truly, Pedro could speak to this. That's a whole nother webinar by itself. When we're talking about enrollment numbers and pressure, because there's sometimes I would shop a school or I'm listening to a call from a brand new lead, and you can tell in the advisor's voice that they're just thinking, I need to get to the ending of this call because I need this appointment, or I need to get to the ending of this interview because I need this person to enroll. And really and truly, if a student is not ready to go to school, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? But if you're having a simple conversation, it may start off with, I'm not ready now. And then in the next 30 minutes, they're like, when is your next class?
Right.
Because they can also sense that I know you need me to be here. Your students are not stupid. They know. Higher education is a business. Your students know that. I've seen students come in and say, I know you get paid commission, which is not true, maybe back in the day, but
Yeah.
this is still how our students think. So you have to be able to change your narrative, shake them out of their comfort zone, and show them something different. And that's how you get your students to open up. We just have to, one, know who our student is in the first place and how to actually communicate with them and understand their background and their circumstances.
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned some of the turnoffs, and I think there is where the turnoffs come in.
Mm-hmm.
Is being inauthentic in the conversations, or being even in written conversations, and starting to use language that sounds forced. I think there's a way to sound like you know what's going on. There's a way to talk with students
Mm-hmm.
in in ways that are comfortable for them,
Mm-hmm.
without sounding, I'm going to use a term, cringe. And there is this fine balance, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to walk that. You have to be able to talk with them, but not necessarily talk like them.
Exactly.
Um, and I think that is sometimes really hard for higher ed, because one, they either feel like, well, we're not being academic enough if we talk this way, or they go so far that it's cringe. Like I don't even know what you're talking about anymore. And that was 2 years ago. Nobody talks like that anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
clearly you're trying too hard. Um, so I think that's one of those kind of push and pulls.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. With advisors, it's sometimes just like you said, find the balance between, okay, what's meeting a student where they are and what's unprofessional.
Yep.
Okay. And let's get real. Higher education is a stiff industry. It is what it is. Okay. That is the truth. Your students know that and they feel that when they call your school. And this is why sometimes it's so hard for students to let their guard down, because they're talking to you and your language is up here. So now they feel like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm talking to authority. You can keep control, but still let your students feel like I understand who you are. Okay, I know how to use commonality without using all of these big words that we know that our students don't understand, right? But then also understanding that all of our students are not just coming out of high school. You have a lot of adults who've been in careers for 10, 15 years, and they're like, yeah, I want to do something different now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we tend to put our student body in a box.
There, yeah, and that's I really am I still hear people use the term non-traditional.
Yeah.
And I personally just really dislike that term, because I feel like there is no such thing anymore, as a non-traditional student, in that so many students have taken on, whether you be a 35-year-old single mom that's raising kids and working, or you're a 17-year-old that is getting ready to go into college, and you have some responsibilities at home. Maybe you have younger siblings that you're having to care for.
Yeah.
Maybe you're working multiple jobs. We tend to higher ed. You said stiff. I say higher ed moves at glacial speeds. Um, and I feel like, I'm like, oh, we made it to the 80s. And then I'm like, maybe the 1880s, and how fast things move in higher
Uh-huh.
ed. But we have this notion that I think that students are still, and it kind of goes back to what you said in the beginning, students haven't changed, that students are still like they were in the late 70s and early
Mhm.
80s. And that's what college looks like. Because a lot of our presidents, and this is changing,
Mhm.
but came through the college experience in
Yeah.
this period.
Correct.
And so for them, that's what college looks like.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not real. It's not
No.
real. It's not the real world. And it's certainly not what students are experiencing. I,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before we leave, one last thing. How do you feel about lead forms? So I see some schools, they may have just a first name, last name, telephone number, email, which I think is fine. Unless you have multiple campuses, of course, you select which campus you're interested in. But then I see some websites and there's like 15 different fields, and it's like social security number, your mom and dad's maiden
oh,
name, and
yeah.
it's like blood type. And it's like, why are these lead forms this long? What do you think about those?
So I'm going to say that's not a lead form, right? Um,
Okay.
that is a pre-qualifying application. That's not a lead form. Lead form should be, if it were up to me, it would go down to email.
Makes sense to me.
However, we do want to be personal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we do want to be able to in our databases to be able to make sure that we're matching people correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So, really for me, I think a lead starting with first name, last name, and email is all you need to start a lead.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Um, I think from there, one, you can suss out if this is real.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not responding to an email, they're not going to talk to you. They're not going to do a phone call.
Exactly.
If they don't ever respond to anything, um, and you can get that additional info. You can build that other additional info in. The more fields you add, the less likely to complete.
That is true, because the longer the application is, or the lead form, it feels like an application. This is why a lot of
Absolutely.
students abandon your website. I like the concept of the first name, last name, and email. I would either do email or phone number, because our students, they're texting. All right.
100%.
Nowadays, no one is checking voicemails. I mean, my voicemail box is always full because really and truly, I don't check them. A lot of times I don't really check emails either, unless there's certain emails that I'm waiting on.
It's
You know?
whatever your primary, so I guess go back to understanding your audience and
Hmm.
how they are using, whatever source it is, if and giving them that choice,
Yeah,
but definitely
no more than
shorter
that.
the better.
Hmm.
Shorter the better, because you are killing your chances. You're absolutely killing
Absolutely.
your chances.
Absolutely.
Follow up as quickly as possible after that.
Mhm.
Anything that takes longer than 10 minutes, you drop off 25% of actually being able to complete anything after the fact.
Yeah.
So if there is not an immediate follow up within the next 10 minutes,
Hmm.
there's no point in you actually having a form.
That's a fact. So Pedro said, I commented this on a higher ed post this morning on LinkedIn. Students aren't just the hero of the story, they are the story. Too many institutions have become self-focused instead of student-focused. Now that's a fact. That is definitely a fact. It goes back to our point earlier of, oh, we were in the top 10 of, and we are amazing, because that's good. After the student gets in, they understand what's in it for them. And now you can start talking about all of your different accolades. And it's like, okay, so this makes sense to me. But in the beginning, your students really don't care, because right now they're trying to figure out, how am I going to get from step A to step B? All of that fluff in the middle, that's awesome. But right now, I'm down and out. I'm looking for a career change or an upgrade, and I have no idea how to get there. So
Absolutely.
please help me get there.
And that's, really, and I go back to that is what we say we're
Mhm.
about in higher ed, is changing lives,
Yeah.
and making that possible. And I think, so important. And I love the language that he used there of it is their story. They are the story,
Mhm.
and each of them have their own story. It is not one size fits all. And I think that's important too. And it's not necessarily my story
Mhm.
or the president's story
Yeah.
or, XYZ. And I think that is really important. And you've got to have the buy-in. You have to have
Yes.
the buy-in from your administration to be able to um, embrace that,
Yeah.
to truly embrace that the story, they are the story, and that we're making the telling of their story possible.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Jamie, this has been an amazing conversation. I really hope that you guys picked up some amazing tips. When we think about student centered, we use a term all the time, but there's tons of people going, but what does that actually mean? What does that really mean?
Yep.
It's about your student, period. Matt just said, enjoy the chat, ladies. You're both amazing, smart. Matt, stop it. But it's about your students. So you always have to think back to, why is this person going on this journey? I always tell advisors, after you hang up the phone, you should be able to name 2 or 3 reasons why this person is coming to see you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have any reasons, you just missed the boat. You missed the entire conversation, and you need to call the student back and find out what their true why is.
Absolutely. The why is always the most important question.
Exactly. Any final thoughts for our audience before we go, Jamie?
I love that you brought up the why. I'm a huge fan of always starting with why.
Uh-huh.
And it goes back to the very beginning. I believe that um, for most of us in higher ed, it's about the why.
Yeah.
And it starts with students and keeping them at the center. And it doesn't mean, when I say that students are consumers or that higher ed is a business, that we treat them like numbers.
Yeah.
And that is important to remember. And I think, again, like you said, that's a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the difference that we can make in these lives, no matter where we sit in an institution.
Absolutely. Well, Jamie, let everyone know how they could get in contact with Three Enrollment if they're looking for services and if they want to
Sure.
be schooled.
Absolutely. So you can contact me at jami.hornbuckle at 3enrollment.com or visit us on the web at 3enrollment.com. And it's just the number 3. You don't have to spell it out. Or, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay connected on LinkedIn. That's how I met Kathy. And looking forward to speaking to each of you that visited today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today, Jamie. Thank you for those who participated, Matt and Pedro. Thank you for those who were listening. I really hope that you are walking away with some amazing gems. Until next time, take care, everyone.